And on this International Women's Day, I rise to say a few words about the women and girls in Afghanistan, as I am the chair of the APPG for Afghan women and girls. And I reflect some of the comments that the Honourable Member for Erith and Thamesmead just made in relation to their experiences. I saw comments in the Telegraph at the weekend that stated the fact that International Women's Day is marked in Afghanistan shows that the day is meaningless, and I would beg to differ with that assessment, particularly given the number of us that are here on a Thursday afternoon. But factually, it's not listed as a holiday in Afghanistan, and we're not seeing celebrations or protests, debates or marketing based on the day itself there, simply because that is not possible for women and girls in Afghanistan. Afghanistan remains a member of the UN, which marks the day, but you don't need to formally indict banning something to effectively do so, not when women cannot gather and they cannot speak, not even in their own homes if they can be heard outside of them. But nonetheless, there is a value to International Women's Day, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I believe even in the darkest of circumstances, there is still value in this day to the women of Afghanistan. As we are hearing in this debate, International Women's Day is about so many struggles, but also about celebrations. And the women of Afghanistan's struggles and the celebration of their resilience has equal value today. And when they cannot speak for themselves, those of us with voices internationally can do so. And indeed, elevating the voices of Afghan women is what the APPG is set up to do. But there is no sugarcoating it, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is bleak in Afghanistan. A new penal code was introduced in January that has effectively legalised domestic violence, including sexual assault within marriages there. Husbands are explicitly authorised to discipline their wives for non-specified transgressions. And the only crime in the books is for a husband who beats his wife with a stick in such a way that it causes severe injury, such as a broken bone. The burden of proof for this offence lies on the woman, and the punishment, if proven, is just 15 days in prison. Injuring animals in Afghanistan carries a greater penalty. And I doubt if we will ever see a prosecution under this law, given that gathering the proof that required would involve the husband who has committed the assault chaperoning his wife to hospital to get the evidential X-ray required. And on the other hand, if a woman tries to leave a marriage by visiting her father or relatives and does so without her husband's consent or refuses to return, you can imagine circumstances where somebody would look to do that in order to escape domestic violence in their house. Then that woman can go to prison for 3 months. And if a woman is found to have abandoned Islam, and I believe here we are talking about the Taliban's interpretation of the faith, which many disagree with, then she can be jailed indefinitely with 10 lashes daily until she chooses to return to the religion. There are severe restrictions on working, which the Honourable Member for Erith and Thamesmead referred to. Some organisations in some areas have negotiated the right for women to keep their jobs. Women still can provide health care, though increasingly women are being denied the right to be trained in healthcare, which means that you can very easily see what that means for the future of maternal and female care in Afghanistan. But we are certainly a long way away from there being a freedom to work, and financial autonomy is simply not a reality. And the future for the next generation is even bleaker. For girls now growing up without completing their education and without women being able to have medical training, there will be a point where there are no women left to provide that healthcare. And the reality is that in a country at war, at the forefront of the climate crisis, where 17 million people faced acute hunger this winter, and with millions of displaced people returning from its neighbours, including Iran, it is women who are bearing the brunt of the desolation. And I'm aware that in setting out this reality, I'm not elevating the experiences or feelings or voices of any one woman. There are 25 million women in Afghanistan, and each and every one of them should have the right to speak, to live freely, and indeed to live at all. And prior to 2021, they were able to do so. So on this International Women's Day, I would like to see commitments from the government to the women and girls of Afghanistan. I put on the record that I do not agree with the government's decision to close the door on safe and legal routes to refuge, or to study or work. I was told on Monday here in the Chamber by the Minister responding to the statement on the Government's response to immigration that it was about ensuring that universities were not making the decisions in relation to who got to stay here. But if there are no other ways for people to come and seek safe refuge, it is not surprising that people take that opportunity. And if they no longer have that opportunity, it will not be surprising if they revert to circumstances such as irregular routes, and by that I mean the small boats that we all say we want to prevent. But having made those decisions, I call on the Government to do more in Afghanistan, much more. The Minister at the outset in her remarks talked about the work this Government does overseas, but I do beg to differ in that assessment. Afghanistan is not one of the ring-fenced countries that the Government has featured as it looks to cut ODA spending. But Afghanistan is apparently a priority. I'd really like to understand what that means and what that looks like. I think it's important that we also recognise the strength of Afghan women. The APPG has had the privilege of hearing from several Afghan women in the last year, as well as NGOs and academics who've spent time on the ground. We've heard a lot, unsurprisingly, about the loss of hope, but we've also heard about resilience, the unbelievable resilience. Afghan women live in unthinkable circumstances for any of us here, but they keep on. And whilst this is a speech setting out terrible things, I'm not asking you to pity the women and girls in Afghanistan. In talking about them, I'm asking you to take action. And I know, Madam Deputy Speaker, you were previously a member of the APPG in the last Parliament and how supportive you were and continue to be. But to end, I want to share the remarks that the APPG heard last year from a female medical practitioner on the ground who told us that she was speaking to us as parliamentarians as a witness to the quiet suffering and untold strength of Afghan women. These stories are not just tragic, they are powerful, and they must inform policy decisions and humanitarian priorities moving forward. I urge the Government to heed those words.